Hello and welcome back to the audio space where we completely dismantle traditional learning and hand you the keys to effortless English fluency. I'm Zinny.
And I'm Frank. Today we are starting with a massive cultural confession. Zinny, if my social media feed forces one more video on me showing a guy waking up at 4:30 a.m., plunging into an ice bath, drinking a liter of swamp green celery juice, and journaling while doing a headstand, my brain is going to permanently short circuit.
It's exhausting, isn't it? The internet has successfully transformed the simple act of waking up into a corporate performance review. We are told to optimize, track, and weaponize every single second before the sun even reaches the horizon. But today, Frank, we are throwing that entire playbook out the window. We're talking about the anti-routine strategy. And we want to show our listeners why chasing a rigid, multi-step morning checklist is actually fracturing their focus and fundamentally stalling their English language acquisition.
Wait, back up. Fracturing focus? Because every self-proclaimed productivity guru out there claims that ultimate structure is the only path to $1 million brain. If I don't have a 90-minute morning ritual, am I just failing at life before breakfast?
Statistically and neurologically, no. In fact, you might be saving yourself. Cognitive psychologists have heavily mapped a phenomenon known as decision fatigue. When you wake up, your brain has a very finite, highly volatile reservoir of mental energy and willpower. If you force your mind to navigate a strict, high-pressure sequence of self-improvement tasks right out of the gate, worrying if you journaled long enough, judging your posture during a meditation session, forcing your thoughts to use complex grammar structures, you are burning through your premium cognitive fuel. By the time you actually sit down to interact with English, your prefrontal cortex is completely depleted. You spent all your willpower on the routine itself, leaving nothing for actual learning.
Wow, it's like warming up for a marathon by running a half marathon in the parking lot right before the starting gun goes off. You're completely gassed before the real event even begins.
Exactly. And it triggers something even worse, cognitive tunneling. The source material we analyzed spoke extensively about protecting your morning from smartphone scrolling to manage your cortisol awakening response. That's fantastic advice for avoiding a digital flood of stress. However, if you replace that phone screen with an artificial, hypercritical productivity checklist, your brain doesn't know the difference. The amygdala, your brain's threat detector, cannot distinguish between the stress of a demanding work email and the internal stress of trying to be a perfectly optimized human. Both states flood your system with survival chemicals, which literally locks the gates to your long-term memory.
So the hyper-optimized morning is just anxiety wrapped in a fancy productivity bow. What's the alternative then, Zinny? How do our listeners build an environment where English fluency actually feels like a natural byproduct of their day, rather than an exhausting uphill battle?
It requires a radical shift from doing language to being in the language. The single greatest barrier to high-level fluency isn't a lack of raw vocabulary or a poor grasp of past perfect tense. It's the constant, exhausting presence of the internal translator. Frank, let me ask you, when someone hits you with a fast sentence in a foreign language, what does your brain instinctively do?
Oh, it goes into full panic station mode. It takes the English words, translates them back to my native language to understand them, formulates what I want to say in my native language, runs it through an internal grammar dictionary to translate it back to English, and then tries to make my mouth move. It's a massive background software program. I call it the buffering wheel of death in conversation. You're just standing there staring blankly at a native speaker while your internal computer is burning up.
That buffering wheel is the direct result of treating a living language like an academic puzzle, a dry set of formulas to be decoded. But your brain is fundamentally built to store language as context, emotion, and sensory experience, not abstract rules. To kill that internal translator, we have to bypass the academic processing center entirely. We achieve this through low-stakes environmental immersion.
Break that down into real-world terms for us. Because most of our listeners don't have 3 spare hours a day to lock themselves in a room with a grammar textbook, and they certainly don't live in downtown London or New York. How do you build an immersive environment without changing your zip code?
You don't need extra hours, and you don't need a plane ticket. You just need to change the systemic, linguistic defaults of your immediate physical reality. Look at the digital interfaces you touch hundreds of times a day. Your smartphone, your laptop, your car's GPS navigation system, or even your smart TV. If those interfaces are set to your native language, you are continuously sending a powerful micro signal to your brain that English is an external chore, a separate destination you only visit when it's time to study.
So the first move is a literal system-wide swap. We flip the digital switch on our tech.
Yes, but that's just the digital layer. Let's look at the psychological layer, your internal monologue. When you're rushing around your house trying to find your car keys or making a mental shopping list, what language is running in your head?
Usually a chaotic mix of stress, mild cursing, and definitely my native language.
Right! The trick is to start narrating those mundane, low-stakes moments in English with one absolute rule: zero self-correction. This is entirely distinct from formal speaking practice. You aren't trying to deliver a master class or a formal presentation. You are simply assigning real-time English labels to your immediate actions. For example, where are the keys? Oh, they're on the counter. The coffee is boiling. I need to walk out the door in 5 minutes. By doing this, you are forcing your brain to link English words directly to physical objects and immediate physical actions. You are completely cutting out the middleman, the internal translator, and training your mind to think directly in the language.
I really like that because it takes performance anxiety completely out of the equation. But let's address the massive elephant in the room, Zinny. A lot of people tune into a podcast like ours, hear us trading ideas back and forth seamlessly, and think, well, sure, Zinny and Frank clearly just possess the language gene. I don't have that biological talent. I'm too old, I'm too busy, or my brain just isn't wired for linguistics. What does actual cognitive science say about this whole natural talent excuse?
It says it's a beautifully constructed psychological defense mechanism designed to protect our feelings. The data provided by neuroplasticity, the brain's lifelong ability to structurally reorganize itself by forging new neural connections, proves that the language gene is an absolute myth. Your brain is a hyper-adaptive organ, whether you are 15, 45, or 75 years old. The fundamental differentiator between a successful language learner and someone who stays stuck isn't genetic talent. It's their internal relationship with emotional friction.
If talent isn't the variable, why does it feel like a walk in the park for a 5-year-old child on a playground to absorb a language, while an adult with a high IQ has to sweat over every sentence?
Because a 5-year-old child doesn't have an overdeveloped adult ego or a reputation to protect. A child standing on a playground doesn't care if they botch a verb tense, mispronounce a noun, or look slightly silly. They just want the toy, or they want to join the game. They communicate with absolute raw vulnerability. Adults, conversely, treat every grammatical mistake as a direct, painful attack on their intelligence and social status. We freeze up because our primary goal isn't communication, it's looking flawless.
Wow. So the real bottleneck isn't a cognitive limitation at all. It's an emotional security guard. We are fiercely protecting our pride at the absolute expense of our progress.
Spot on, Frank. If you look at long-term linguistic tracking data, the individuals who scale the heights of fluency the fastest aren't the ones with the highest standard IQ scores or the most expensive degrees. They are the individuals with the highest tolerance for ambiguity and temporary social discomfort. They are perfectly happy stepping into a room, making a total mess of a sentence, laughing at themselves, and keeping the conversational momentum alive. They don't let a forgotten vocabulary word cause a full mental lockdown.
Let's pivot to that idea of keeping the momentum alive. If we want to build a real tolerance for ambiguity, we need to consume content that doesn't feel like a mental drywall. If I'm forced to read incredibly dense, boring academic journals or economic white papers just because they happen to be printed in English, my brain is going to check out within 10 minutes.
This brings us directly to the golden rule of language acquisition: comprehensible input plus one, a framework championed by the brilliant linguist Stephen Krashen. The supreme neurological sweet spot for language growth occurs when you consume audio or text where you understand roughly 80% of what is happening. The remaining 20% should consist of brand new vocabulary, unfamiliar slang, or advanced structures that you do not know yet, but can naturally deduce based on the context of the surrounding story.
Means the absolute worst thing you can do is sit there with a dictionary, stopping the audio or reading every time you hit a word you don't recognize.
It's absolute poison for fluency speaker too. Stopping every 30 seconds to look up a word completely decimates the narrative arc and instantly drops your brain out of a state of flow. It transforms an engaging piece of media into a painful academic chore. Remember, your brain is the most sophisticated pattern recognition machine on the planet. If you allow yourself to simply swim in the stream of the language, your subconscious mind will automatically start calculating and guessing the meanings of that unknown 20%. That specific act of contextual deduction is what creates deep, permanent, indelible neural pathways.
It's exactly like watching a great detective film. You don't want the director pausing the movie every 5 minutes to explain the clues. You want your own mind to do the puzzle work while you enjoy the ride.
Exactly, and that is the exact blueprint behind everything we produce in this series. We want to challenge our listeners, keep them highly entertained, and naturally feed their subconscious minds the structural patterns required to bridge the gap between exhausting intermediate translation and spontaneous, fluid expression.
All right, Zinny, let's land this plane for everyone listening around the world. We've completely exposed the toxicity of the hyper-optimized morning routine. We've shown exactly how to dismantle the internal translator, and we've shattered the talent myth into a million pieces. What is the single, non-negotiable, actionable system that someone can implement within the next 10 minutes to permanently alter their fluency trajectory?
It is a framework I call the micro-immersion rule. I want everyone listening to stop making massive, unsustainable promises to themselves like, I'm going to study English for an hour every night. That promise is psychologically heavy, it triggers resistance, and life will inevitably get in the way. Instead, I want you to commit to exactly 5 minutes of pure, unadulterated, high-leverage English input every single day, anchored to a pre-existing transition point in your day.
Just 5 minutes? Zinny, I can hear the skeptics shaking their heads right now. How can a tiny 5-minute window create any measurable cognitive change over the long term?
Because 5 minutes of deeply focused, emotionally resonant input delivered with absolute daily consistency is vastly superior to a 2-hour block of high-stress, agonizing studying done once a week. Consistency completely rewires the physical architecture of your brain. When your subconscious mind notices that English is an unyielding, predictable, daily element of your actual survival reality, it stops treating it as a hostile foreign system. It adopts it as a natural, instinctive extension of who you are.
Incredible. Well, there you have it, family. Stop trying to force your life into a state of hyper-optimized stress. Drop the perfectionism, start narrating your morning coffee to your kitchen counter, flip the language settings on your phone, and give yourself full, unapologetic permission to make an absolute mess of the language until it naturally starts making sense.
Thank you for sharing this space with us today. Keep pushing boundaries, keep testing your limits, and we will see you right back here in the very next episode.
Bye-bye for now.